The rain poured heavily over the bustling streets of New York. The scene was a mix of bright lights from skyscrapers and deep shadows from alleys and narrow streets. On this rainy night, Michael Thompson, a successful 40-year-old businessman, drove his sports car through the deserted streets. His mind was lost in dark thoughts about the past. 10 years ago, Michael was a young entrepreneur full of dreams and ambitions. He and his partner Richard had founded a tech company that promised to revolutionize the market. At the peak of their success, Richard betrayed him, embezzling company funds and fleeing with a fortune. Michael was left ruined, watching years of hard work turn to dust. Since then, he had rebuilt himself from scratch, creating a new business empire. However, the price was high. Michael had built emotional walls around himself, fearing to trust anyone again. His life was a lonely routine of work, meetings, and more work. On that rainy night, as he stopped at a red light, Michael noticed a figure huddled in a dark alley. It was a young woman, soaked and shivering from the cold. Without quite knowing why, he pulled over and rolled down the window. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, his voice sounding strange even to himself. The young woman looked at him, her brown eyes shining with a mix of fear and determination. "I'm homeless, sir. Just looking for a dry place to spend the night." Something in her tone moved him. Before he could think twice, Michael said, "Get in the car. You can stay at my place tonight." The young woman, whose name was Laura, hesitated for a moment, eyeing Michael suspiciously, but the cold, relentless rain made her accept the offer. She got into the car, shivering and shrinking into the leather seat. The drive to Michael's apartment was silent. He watched her through the rearview mirror, intrigued by the strength emanating from such a fragile woman. When they arrived, he led her to one of the guest suites. "Make yourself at home. There are dry clothes in the closet, and the bathroom is right there," he said, pointing to a door. Laura nodded, her eyes widening as she took in the luxury around her. "Thank you, sir. I don't know how to thank you. Just rest." "We'll talk more tomorrow," Michael said as he left the room, leaving her alone. While taking a hot shower, Laura reflected on the recent events in her life. Just a few months ago, she had a small apartment and worked as a waitress to support her sick mother. When her mother passed away, Laura could no longer afford rent or medical bills, ending up on the streets. The next day, Michael found her having breakfast in the spacious kitchen. He observed her in silence, impressed by her dignified posture, even after all she had endured. "So, Laura, what's your story?" he asked. She took a deep breath and began to share her journey, from her humble childhood to the happy days working at her parents' bakery and the struggle to care for her sick mother. Her dream, she revealed, was to open her own bakery, bringing back memories of simpler, happier times. Michael listened intently, feeling an unexpected connection to this brave woman. For the first time in years, he opened up, sharing the pain of the betrayal that had marked him forever. "I work day and night to rebuild what I lost, but I still can't fully trust people," he admitted. Laura looked at him with compassion. "I understand your pain, but you can't live like this forever. Someday you'll have to take the risk of trusting again." His words touched Michael in a way he hadn't expected. That morning, under the soft light of the kitchen, he made an unexpected decision. "Laura, I'm going to help you achieve your dream of opening a bakery." In the days that followed, Julia threw herself entirely into the bakery, determined to make her dream come true. However, challenges weren't long in coming. One morning, as she arrived to start the day's preparations, she found chaos. "What's going on?" she asked, seeing some of the staff in a flurry. "Mrs. Joan didn't show up today, and Peter said she called to say she's sick," explained Marcia, her longest-serving assistant. Julia furrowed her brow, concerned. Joan was one of the most experienced bakers, and her absence could seriously hurt production. She took a deep breath, searching for a solution. "All right, I'll need extra hands in the kitchen. Who else can help me today?" Before Marcia could answer, the doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of the first morning customers. The young woman exchanged a tense glance with her assistant. "I'll handle the counter for now. You go to the kitchen and send Kyle over here," Julia instructed. The morning had turned into a real challenge, with the bakery packed and too few staff to meet the demand. Julia divided her time between the counter and the ovens, trying to keep everything under control. At one point, exhausted, she had to sit down for a few moments. That's when her phone rang, displaying Michael's number. "Julia, is everything okay?" The businessman's voice sounded concerned as he noticed her tired expression. "As good as it can be," she forced a smile. "We're short-staffed today, and things have been crazy here. I understand. Do you need help?" he promptly offered. The young woman thought about refusing but realized she couldn't handle it alone. "Actually, it would be a big help if you could come," she finally admitted. No sooner had they hung up than the doorbell rang again, announcing an unexpected customer. Julia froze as she recognized Richard, her ex-boyfriend, standing there with a wide grin. "Hi, Ju. What a coincidence running into you here," he greeted casually, walking up to the counter. She swallowed hard, trying to hide her annoyance. Ever since they had broken up months ago, Richard had been insisting on reconnecting, something Julia had no interest in. "Richard, I'm working right now. What do you want?" she asked bluntly. "Oh, don't be so formal," he gave a mischievous wink. "I heard you opened this bakery and wanted to congratulate you in person since we've barely talked lately." Julia held back an impatient sigh. With the store full and so few staff, she didn't have time to waste. "Thank you," she forced a polite smile. "But as you can see, I'm really busy. If you'd like, you can place your order and I—" Before she could finish her sentence, Michael rushed in from the kitchen. He stopped, visibly unsettled, upon seeing Richard there. "Julia, is everything okay?" he asked with a protective tone. "Yes, Michael, thank you," she quickly replied. "This is Richard, an old acquaintance of mine." "Richard, this is Michael." The two men exchanged polite but cold greetings. A tense atmosphere hung in the air for a few moments. "Well, I don't want to interrupt your work," Richard broke the silence, turning to Julia. "But we need to talk calmly later, Ju. There are some things I need to tell you." Without waiting for a response, he left under Michael's serious gaze. The businessman gently held the young woman by the arm. "Are you okay?" His voice was low, full of concern. "This guy seems like a complicated person." "It was nothing, just my ex-boyfriend being pushy as usual." Julia shrugged, trying to hide her real discomfort. "But we don't need to worry about that now. Let's get back to work before this madness gets worse." Michael watched her for a moment before nodding in agreement, clearly not entirely convinced. The following days were a real marathon. With Joan temporarily absent, Julia and her team had to double their efforts to keep deliveries on schedule. Nights of sleep became increasingly scarce, but she didn't falter. Her determination to move forward with her dream was unshakable. Michael showed up almost every day to help with whatever was needed. Seeing the young woman so hard-working and dedicated captivated him even more. She embodied everything he admired: strength, courage, and persistence. It reminded him of himself decades ago, when he had started his own business with the same unwavering drive. However, the trauma of Gregory's betrayal still haunted his mind, threatening to weaken his belief in people's potential. One early morning, Julia yawned tiredly after yet another long day of work in the kitchen. Michael found her sitting at the staff area table, her hair carelessly tied back and her face sweaty. "It's a real mess around here, isn't it?" he commented lightly, pulling up a chair to join her. "Don't even get me started," Julia rubbed her eyes. "But things will calm down soon, I promise. Joan is almost fully recovered." "I don't doubt that. The way you're handling everything is impressive." There was genuine admiration in the businessman's gaze. Julia smiled, flattered by the compliment. Then her expression turned serious. "Michael, do you mind if I ask you a question?" "Of course not, go ahead." The young woman hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words. "How did you manage to rebuild your life after that terrible blow you suffered? I mean, I saw how much it shook you, and yet you successfully rebuilt your business empire." The businessman tensed, surprised by the frankness of the question. As close as Julia was to him, it was still hard to talk about that painful episode. "It wasn't easy, believe me," he began in a somber tone. "For a long time I even considered throwing everything away and looking for something else to do. But in the end, my entrepreneurial drive spoke louder. That has always been my essence, and I couldn't simply give up on everything I had built." He looked away for a few moments as if diving into bitter memories. Julia watched him in silence, without pressuring him. "The problem was that, to get my business back on track, I had to adopt a much stricter and more distrustful attitude," he continued at last. "I built real emotional walls around myself. I learned the hard way that I couldn't put my faith in people, much less in future partners or associates. Anyone could turn out to be another Gregory in my life. I can imagine how terrible that must have been, Julia sympathized. And how has it been living with those walls so high? It seems like an extremely lonely life. Michael looked at her for a few moments, once again surprised by the young woman's insight. However, he couldn't deny what she had said. It really is a lonely life, he admitted finally, shrugging with a heavy heart. But it was the only way I found to protect myself and preserve the little I still had. They fell into a reflective silence. The emotional struggles of the businessman were becoming increasingly clear to Julia. Maybe these walls can be torn down one day, she dared to suggest, trying to cheer him up. An incredible person like you deserves so much more than loneliness. Michael Thompson offered a grateful smile, though he doubted it was possible after everything he had been through. Yet in that moment, looking at Julia, something inside him felt that maybe there was still hope. The stifling heat of New York didn't seem to dampen the contagious energy that filled the small bakery. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of emotions and challenges, but Julia's determination was unshakable. With her team united by her side, she faced every obstacle with grit, inspired by the dream she was building brick by brick. As she oversaw the preparations for the day, Julia couldn't help but smile at the walls now decorated with colorful drawings made by the neighborhood children. Each stroke was a vivid reminder of the impact the bakery was already having on the community. Her heart swelled with pride as she remembered how they had resisted the eviction attempt, joining forces with local merchants and residents. "Good morning, Julia." Claudia's cheerful voice, her trusted pastry assistant, interrupted her thoughts. "We have a lot of orders for today. I think we'll need extra hands in the kitchen." Julia nodded, adjusting her apron. "Of course, I'll call some of the young people who help us. They've been amazing, always willing to learn." While Claudia organized the orders, Julia walked to the back area, where a group of teenagers from the neighborhood gathered every morning. Some had faced difficulties on the streets, but there they found a purpose and the opportunity to acquire culinary skills. "Guys, we need help today. Who can stay?" asked Julia, smiling as she saw hands eagerly rising. In the following moments, the kitchen turned into a whirlwind of frenetic activity, with everyone working in harmony. Julia felt increasingly grateful for having found such a dedicated team, willing to make sacrifices for the success of the project. Suddenly, the familiar ring of her phone snapped her out of her thoughts. It was Michael, the businessman who had become her mentor and partner on this journey. "Hello, Michael. Is everything okay?" "Julia, I need to talk to you. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" His voice sounded tense, which immediately worried her. "Of course, I'll be there." "Did something happen?" There was a pause before he answered. "It's about Richard. He hasn't given up." Julia felt a tightness in her chest upon hearing the name of Michael's rival, the man who had done so much to sabotage their plans. Taking a deep breath, she agreed to meet with Michael later, determined to face any new challenge that might arise. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity, with Julia and her team handling a flood of orders. Even with physical exhaustion, she found strength in the satisfaction of seeing customers leave with smiles on their faces, savoring their freshly baked treats. As soon as her shift ended, Julia changed clothes and headed to the imposing building where Michael's office was located. Her heart raced, fearing what might be coming. Upon entering the spacious room, she found him seated at the table, his expression tense. Michael stood up, greeting her with a warm hug. "Thank you for coming, Julia. Please have a seat." She nodded, sitting in the chair across from him. "What's going on, Michael? What has Richard done this time?" Michael sighed, running his hand through his graying hair. "He's trying to sue us again, questioning the legality of the bakery's commercial lease agreement." Julia paled, remembering the weeks of anguish they had endured when Richard threatened to evict them before they even got started. "But how? We followed all the legal procedures." "I know, but he found a loophole," Michael said, sliding some documents toward her. "Richard claims there were irregularities in the property bidding process and is demanding the contract be terminated." Julia flipped through the papers, her heart sinking with each page. It was all an elaborate scheme to hit them where it hurt the most. "What are we going to do?" she asked, raising her pleading eyes to Michael. "We can't lose the bakery. It's all I have." Michael reached out, gently covering her hand with his. "We're not giving up, Julia. I promise. We will fight with all our strength just as we did before." At that moment, Julia felt a wave of gratitude for having Michael by her side. He had become much more than a mentor. He was a true partner, willing to face any battle to protect what they had built together. "Together, then." She squeezed his hand, feeling a renewed determination. "Richard won't bring us down this time." In the days that followed, Michael and Julia plunged into a full-blown legal war against Richard and his dishonest tactics. Every step was a battle, requiring meticulous strategies and unwavering willpower. While Michael handled the legal proceedings, Julia focused her efforts on keeping the bakery running, knowing that every satisfied customer was a victory over Richard's attempts at sabotage. She spent long hours working alongside her dedicated team, encouraging them and constantly reminding them of the greater purpose that united them. "Team, we need to focus on offering the best possible experience for our customers," Julia said during a morning meeting. "Every smile we bring is proof that we're on the right path." The words of encouragement were like fuel for the team, who pushed themselves even harder to exceed expectations. Claudia, the pastry assistant, had become a true partner to Julia, anticipating her needs and sharing her passion for the project. "You've been amazing, Julia," Claudia said one night as they cleaned the last counters. "I don't know how you managed to stay calm under so much pressure." Julia smiled, tired but grateful for her friend's support. "Sometimes it's hard, I admit. But then I look at this bakery, at the people we serve, and I remember why I do all this. That's what keeps me strong." As they faced challenges side by side, the bond between Julia and Michael grew even stronger. They spent hours discussing strategies, sharing frustrations, and celebrating every small victory. Gradually, Julia realized that her feelings for him had evolved into something deeper than gratitude or friendship. However, she hesitated to explore this connection, fearing it might risk the delicate balance they had achieved. Michael, for his part, seemed equally reluctant to cross that line, maintaining a professional distance despite the growing intimacy between them. Amid the legal battle, a new challenge arose unexpectedly. One morning, Julia received a call that left her stunned. It was Richard, the very man they had fought so hard to defeat. "Julia, my dear, I have a proposal for you." His voice was smooth yet laced with malice. "Listen carefully." Richard then laid out a bold plan. He offered to invest a substantial amount in the bakery, transforming it into a high-end chain of confectionaries. In return, he demanded that Julia abandon Michael and join him as the majority partner. "Think carefully, Julia. I can make your dreams come true on a much larger scale than Michael could ever offer," he insisted, his voice full of tempting promises. Julia fell silent, her mind racing. For a brief moment, the prospect of expanding her business so extensively enticed her. But then she remembered the humble roots of the bakery, the impact it had made on the community, and the valuable lessons she had learned from Michael. "Thank you for the offer, Richard, but I can't accept," she replied firmly. "My path is beside Michael, and I won't betray our partnership for money." Richard's dry laugh echoed through the phone. "You'll regret this, Julia. Consider this your last chance." When she hung up, Julia felt a mix of relief and apprehension. She was certain that her refusal would bring consequences, but she couldn't imagine how far Richard was willing to go to hurt them. That night, Julia decided to share the conversation with Michael. As they walked through the illuminated streets of New York, she revealed every detail of Richard's proposal, watching the tension grow on his face. "I knew he wouldn't give up so easily," Michael murmured, his eyes darkened with worry. "But I'm proud of you for refusing, Julia. It shows how strong and principled you are." Julia felt her heart warm at his words, but she couldn't shake the fear of what was to come. "And now, Michael, what will we do if Richard really decides to destroy us?" Michael stopped, turning to face her. There was a fierce determination in his eyes as he replied, "We'll fight, Julia. No matter what he tries, we won't give up. We're in this battle together side by side until the end." At that moment, under the shimmering city lights, Julia knew she wasn't alone. With Michael by her side, they were ready to face any obstacle Richard threw their way. Together, they were an unstoppable force. The bakery had become the center of attention in the entire neighborhood. The news of the lawsuit filed by the businessman's rival spread quickly, and a wave of solidarity swept through the local community. People who had never even known the young entrepreneur before began frequenting the establishment, not just for the delicious bread and pastries, but also to show their support for her cause. The young woman found herself overwhelmed by the workload, but her tireless spirit pushed her to keep going. She hired more staff and extended the business hours, determined not to leave anyone unattended. Her dedication and passion for the business were evident in every gesture. The businessman, still recovering from his health crisis, watched everything closely. Seeing the young woman's strength and resilience inspired him to face his own demons. He questioned how he had allowed fear and distrust to dominate him for so long, preventing him from fully enjoying life. It was then that the young woman's ex-boyfriend reappeared. He arrived at the bakery with a charming smile, saying he had heard about the difficulties she was facing and wanted to offer his support. Touched by the gesture, the young woman accepted his help, unaware of his true intentions. Behind the scenes, the ex-boyfriend was working in partnership with the businessman's rival. His goal was to gain the young woman's trust and convince her to give up the business, thereby weakening the businessman's position. In the days that followed, the ex-boyfriend became a constant presence at the bakery, offering suggestions and ideas that were actually aimed at undermining the success of the venture. Naively, the young woman accepted his recommendations without realizing the true intentions behind them. The businessman, however, felt that something wasn't right. He closely observed the interactions between the young woman and her ex-boyfriend, and his suspicion grew with each passing day. She decided to investigate on her own, hiring a private detective to gather more information about the boy's past and connections. Meanwhile, the situation at the bakery grew increasingly tense. The legal proceedings advanced, and the threat of eviction became imminent. The young woman worked tirelessly, trying to keep the operation running while dealing with the legal pressure. It was then that the private detective brought revealing information. The ex-boyfriend had been hired by the businessman's rival to infiltrate the bakery and cause internal damage. Armed with this evidence, the businessman confronted the young woman, exposing the truth behind the boy's actions. At first, the young woman refused to believe it, blinded by the trust she had placed in him. But as more evidence was presented, she could no longer deny the cruel reality. Her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces as she realized she had been betrayed once again. The revelation of the ex-boyfriend's betrayal deeply shook the young entrepreneur. She felt betrayed and deceived, reliving the pains of the past. The businessman, seeing the suffering in her eyes, approached and enveloped her in a comforting embrace. In that moment, an even deeper connection was established between them. Both had been victims of betrayal and disappointment, but together they found the strength to overcome these traumas. The young woman realized that the businessman had opened up once again, trusting her and sharing his vulnerabilities. Determined not to let the rival and his accomplices win, they united in a common front. The young woman called a meeting with all the bakery employees, revealing the truth about her ex-boyfriend's actions and asking for their loyalty during this crucial moment. To her surprise, the team showed complete solidarity. Many of them had become attached to the young woman's dream and the cause the bakery represented. They refused to give up, even in the face of the eviction threat. With the team's support, the young woman and the businessman devised a plan of action. They decided to mobilize the local community, relying on the backing of residents and local merchants. They organized an awareness campaign, distributing flyers and holding events to draw attention to the injustice they were facing. The community's response was overwhelming. People of all ages and backgrounds joined the cause, sharing stories of how the bakery had positively impacted their lives. Some recounted how the jobs created had helped their families during tough times, while others spoke of the warmth and kindness they found at the establishment. Faced with this wave of support, the businessman's rival realized his strategy was failing. He tried to increase the pressure, threatening even harsher legal actions, but the community stood firm. In a symbolic act, the young woman led a peaceful vigil in front of the bakery, gathering hundreds of people who refused to leave the premises. The emotional scene caught the attention of the local media, which began to spread the story of struggle and resistance against injustice. The businessman, watching everything closely, felt his heart swell with pride and admiration for the young woman. She had become a true leader, inspiring people with her courage and determination. At that moment, he realized that his fears and traumas from the past had finally been overcome. With the pressure of public opinion, the businessman's rival was forced to back down. He abandoned the lawsuit and gave up on his attempts at sabotage. The bakery had won an important battle, thanks to the unity of the community and the strength of the young entrepreneur. That night, the businessman and the young woman celebrated together, embracing and emotional. They had proven that together they were capable of facing any challenge. And in that moment, both knew that their bond had become much more than just a business partnership. The bakery was going through one of its most challenging periods. With the businessman temporarily away due to health reasons, the young woman found herself forced to take the lead alone, facing the constant sabotage from the rival. The situation became even more complicated with the unexpected return of Richard, her ex-boyfriend. He showed up at the bakery, claiming to regret leaving her and promising to support her dreams. However, the young woman was suspicious of his true intentions, especially after discovering that he was secretly working with the businessman's rival. "I know I made a lot of mistakes in the past, but I'm willing to change," Richard insisted. "This bakery is your dream and I want to help you achieve it." Despite her suspicions, the young woman couldn't deny that she needed all the support she could get at that moment. The businessman was absent, the employees were demotivated by the constant sabotage, and the lawsuit threatened to close the bakery's doors at any moment. Richard offered to mediate a meeting with investors interested in the project, which could be the solution to the financial problems. Reluctantly, the young woman agreed but decided to remain cautious. The meeting with the supposed investors brought more doubts than certainties. They made a tempting offer to invest a considerable amount in the bakery, provided the young woman agreed to become a minority partner and relinquish control over decisions. "You don't understand. This bakery isn't just a business for me," she explained. "It's a dream, a mission to bring hope and opportunities to the local community." The investors didn't seem convinced and insisted that without the financial injection, the bakery would be closed within weeks. The young woman found herself facing a dilemma: accept the offer and lose control of her dream, or refuse and risk everything. At this critical moment, she remembered the words of the businessman, who always valued determination and principles above all else. Summoning all her courage, she refused the offer and decided to fight to the end to keep the bakery as she had always dreamed. The following days were a true battle. The legal process was advancing rapidly, and the threat of eviction became increasingly real. Richard kept insisting that she accept the investor's offer, but the young woman remained firm in her decision. Then, in an act of desperation, she decided to ask for help from the local community. She organized a meeting with local merchants and residents, explaining the bakery's situation and the risk of losing such a precious space. To her surprise, the response was overwhelming. Dozens of people came forward, willing to support the cause in every possible way. Some offered donations, others volunteered to work at the bakery, and many committed to visiting and promoting the establishment. The community's mobilization around the bakery was a turning point. The young woman, who once felt alone and helpless, was now surrounded by an army of supporters willing to fight by her side. Donations began to pour in, allowing the bakery to continue operating and paying its bills. Volunteers took shifts, ensuring that service was never interrupted. And word-of-mouth publicity significantly increased demand for the products. Richard, seeing that his attempts to convince her to accept the investor's proposal had failed, decided to go on the offensive. He began spreading negative rumors about the bakery, accusing it of failing to comply with health regulations and selling questionable quality products. At first, these rumors worried the young woman, but the community once again rallied to her defense. Local residents and business owners began sharing their own positive experiences with the bakery on social media, refuting the accusations and praising the team's dedication and commitment. Frustrated, Richard resorted to more drastic measures. He hired a group of vandals to attack the bakery at night, smashing windows and graffitiing the walls with offensive messages. The scene of destruction the next day was shocking, but it only strengthened the determination of the young woman and her supporters. Within hours, a volunteer task force organized to clean and restore the place, while the community took turns standing guard to prevent further attacks. The businessman, who had been monitoring the situation from afar, finally recovered and returned to New York. Upon arriving at the bakery and seeing the scene of unity and resistance, he was deeply moved. "I didn't believe it was possible, but you did it," he said to the young woman, embracing her with tears in his eyes. "You've proven that the strength of a shared dream can overcome any obstacle." With the businessman's return, the battle against the rival took a new turn. He decided to publicly confront the accusations and expose the dishonest practices of his former partner. At a press conference, the businessman revealed documents and evidence that proved the sabotage and attempts to boycott the bakery. He also shared his own story, explaining how past betrayal had shaped him, but that he was now ready to move forward. The impact was immediate. The media and public opinion turned against his rival, condemning his low and unethical tactics. Many companies and investors announced the termination of business relations with him, further isolating him. With renewed support from the community and the rival's threat neutralized, the bakery could finally breathe. Sales began to grow again, and the legal case was resolved in favor of the young woman and the businessman. However, the journey was not yet over. A new opportunity arose when a famous restaurant in New York offered the young woman the chance to become an executive chef, with a high salary and national recognition. The hall was impeccably decorated, with fresh flower arrangements and soft lights, creating a welcoming atmosphere. The tables were arranged in a circular format, allowing everyone to have a clear view of the small improvised stage. The entire community had been invited to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the bakery and the social center. As the guests arrived, Marianne circulated, greeting everyone with a warm smile. She could hardly contain her emotion, seeing how much the project had grown and impacted so many lives. Her gaze landed on Peter, who was animatedly chatting with some of the bakery's first employees. Even after all these years, her heart still warmed at the sight of him. The journey to that point had not been easy. There were moments of despair when it seemed like everything would crumble under the sabotage attempts by Peter's former partner, but together they had overcome every obstacle, strengthening their partnership and mutual trust. Marianne remembered the night when Peter finally decided to share his story with the community. He had revealed the details of the betrayal that had deeply marked him, exposing his vulnerabilities in a way he never imagined he could. And instead of judgment, he was met with understanding and unconditional support. That moment had been a turning point for Peter. He had finally freed himself from the weight of past disappointments and embraced a new perspective on life, based on trust and belief in people's potential. And Marianne had been his greatest inspiration on this journey. Her resilience, determination, and compassion had touched his heart in a way he never thought possible. Together, they had built something greater than they had initially dreamed. The social center had become a beacon of hope for women in vulnerable situations, offering professional training, counseling, and job opportunities at the bakery and other community initiatives. The transformed life stories were living proof of the impact they were making. As Marianne took the stage to begin the celebrations, Peter watched with pride. He could hardly believe how far they had come. His life, once marked by distrust and loneliness, now overflowed with love, purpose, and meaningful connections. Marianne began her speech, sharing pivotal moments from the journey and thanking everyone who had contributed to the project's success. Her heartfelt words touched the hearts of everyone present, reminding them of the transformative power of compassion and determination. When she invited Peter to join her on stage, he felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. Taking her in his arms, he looked out at the crowd and shared his own perspective on the journey that had brought them there. 5 years ago, I was a bitter man, consumed by distrust and the fear of allowing myself to love again, he said, his voice heavy with emotion. But then, Marianne came into my life and taught me that true strength lies in embracing vulnerability and trusting others. He paused, looking at Marianne with adoration. Together, we proved that love can overcome even the deepest traumas and create something truly extraordinary. As applause echoed through the hall, Peter pulled Marianne closer, sealing their lips in a passionate kiss. In that moment, they were the embodiment of love triumphing over adversity, a living reminder that the most challenging journey can lead to unimaginable places when one has courage and compassion. The years passed, and the bakery and community center continued to thrive, becoming true pillars of the local community. Marianne and Peter had married in an intimate ceremony, sealed by their vows of love and mutual commitment. And soon after, They were blessed with the arrival of a son, John, who quickly became the center of their lives. As she watched John run through the bakery's garden, chasing butterflies with his crystal-clear laughter, Marianne could hardly believe the journey they had taken. That place, which had once been just a distant dream, was now a home filled with love, hope, and purpose. Peter approached from behind, wrapping her in a tender embrace. "You seem thoughtful," he said, placing a gentle kiss on her forehead. Marianne smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Just appreciating how much our lives have changed. Remember when everything seemed so uncertain and difficult?" Peter nodded, his gaze lost in memories. "Yes, those were challenging times, but they were worth every second because they brought us here." They stayed silent for a moment, watching John play carefreely. The social center had expanded even further, opening new avenues of work and impacting hundreds of lives. Women who were once in precarious situations had found strength, independence, and a renewed sense of purpose. "I can hardly believe we overcame all those attempts at sabotage," said Marianne, shaking her head. "If it weren't for your determination and courage, everything could have fallen apart." Peter held her tighter. "No, we were a team from the start. Your resilience and compassion inspired me to face my fears and trust again." They shared a look filled with emotion, recalling the endless nights of planning, the tears of frustration, and the victories celebrated with joy. Every challenge had only strengthened their bond and their determination to create something lasting and meaningful. "Do you remember the night I decided to share my story with the community?" asked Peter, his voice soft. Marianne nodded, her eyes shining. "How could I forget? It was the moment you finally broke free from the shackles of the past." Peter smiled, gently caressing her face. "And it was all thanks to you. Your love and support gave me the strength I needed to face my demons and embrace a new perspective." At that moment, John ran up to them, his little arms outstretched in a silent request for affection. Marianne lifted him, showering him with kisses as he laughed joyfully. Peter wrapped them both in a tight embrace, his heart overflowing with gratitude for the family they had built. Together, they had proven that true love can overcome any obstacle and create a lasting legacy. The bakery and the community center were far more than successful ventures. They were living symbols of the transformative power of compassion, determination, and belief in human potential. And as they walked back to the cozy bakery, with John nestled in their arms, Marianne and Peter knew their journey had only just begun. There was still so much to do, lives to touch, and dreams to fulfill. But together, they were ready to face any challenge, strengthened by the love that united them and the conviction that with courage and perseverance, anything is possible.